Hello and welcome to Art and Insurance. This is the channel where art history turns into investigation, money meets responsibility, and every story is told not as a lecture, but as a real incident with real consequences. Here, masterpieces are not just cultural symbols. They are assets, risks, and liabilities. Today's case is one of the most infamous unsolved art crimes in history. A quiet night in Boston. Two men dressed as police officers, 81 minutes inside a museum. And the disappearance of artworks worth more than $500 million. This is the 1990 heist at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. In the early hours of March 18, 1990, two men knocked on the museum's side entrance, claiming to respond to a disturbance. They were let in. Within minutes, the guards were restrained, handcuffed, and locked in the basement. For the next hour and 21 minutes, the thieves moved through the galleries unchallenged. They took 13 works of art. Among them were paintings attributed to Rembrandt and Johannes Vermeer, artists whose works almost never appear on the market and whose value is considered irreplaceable. The empty frames still hang in the museum today. The artworks have never been recovered. From a detective perspective, the case is extraordinary. From an insurance perspective, it is even more complex. The first question that arises is simple but uncomfortable. Who pays when a masterpiece disappears forever? Unlike a stolen car or a burned building, art losses don't resolve neatly. Recovery can take decades, or never happen at all. That creates a long-term financial and legal vacuum. At the time of the theft, the Gardner Museum was not insured in the conventional sense. Isabella Stewart Gardner's original will required that the collection remain intact and unchanged. That provision shaped how the museum operated, how it managed risk, and crucially, how it approached insurance. This meant there was no standard insurance payout to replace the stolen works. Instead, responsibility shifted inward. Museums operate under a duty of care. They are expected to provide reasonable security, preservation, and protection. When a theft occurs, investigators don't just ask who stole the art, they ask whether the institution met its obligations. In the Gardner case, several vulnerabilities became obvious after the fact. The alarm system was outdated, motion detectors were limited, surveillance cameras were minimal, guards were unarmed, undertrained, and allowed to admit visitors outside normal hours without verification. None of these failures caused the crime, but they shaped liability. From an insurance and risk management standpoint, this case illustrates a critical distinction. Insurance does not exist to cover negligence. It exists to transfer defined risks under defined conditions. When coverage is limited or absent, the financial burden doesn't disappear. It shifts to the institution itself. The Gardner Museum faced not just the loss of art, but reputational damage, increased security costs, long-term investigation expenses, and decades of unresolved responsibility. The museum continues to offer a reward for information, funded not by insurers, but through institutional resources. There is also the question of valuation. How do you insure something that has no true market equivalent? Works by Rembrandt and Vermeer are not replaceable assets. Even if insured, payouts are based on agreed or appraised values, not cultural loss. Money can compensate financially, but it cannot restore historical integrity. That gap between financial compensation and cultural responsibility is where art insurance becomes uniquely complex. Modern museums have learned from this case. Today, major collections rely on layered insurance structures, government indemnity programs, strict security protocols, and detailed risk assessments. Loans, exhibitions, and storage are all evaluated through the lens of exposure and liability. The Gardner heist changed how insurers, museums, and governments think about art risk, precisely because it remains unresolved. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist is not just a story about stolen paintings. It is a story about responsibility when prevention fails and recovery never comes. It shows that in the world of art, loss is not only measured in money, but in trust, duty, and long-term accountability. At Art and Insurance, we explore these cases to show how cultural heritage intersects with financial reality. If you're dealing with art loss, damage, disputed claims, or questions of responsibility around valuable artworks, Art and Insurance is where investigation meets professional risk management. We analyze real incidents at the intersection of art, money, and liability, from museums to private collections. For expert support in art insurance, valuation, claims handling, or dispute resolution, contact us. Thank you for watching Art and Insurance. See you